Well, we're in part 4 of guardrails, and even though we know how that works with vehicles, the truth is, in many areas of our lives, our finances, our relationships, our morality, in different areas, we need guardrails. So we've asked the question, what would it look like to establish guardrails in lots of different areas of our lives? In other words, what would it look like to develop systems that keep us from straying into dangerous areas, financially, morally, relationally, professionally, academically, whatever it might be. So we came up with our own definition of a guardrail. So here's our definition. It's a standard of personal behavior, which means it's a behavior that you choose for yourself, a standard of personal behavior that becomes a matter of conscience. And so what we've talked about in these last few weeks is what would it be like if we created standards of behavior, that is, this is what I will and won't do, we just come up with them on our own, and we so tune our conscience into those that when we begin to break our own standard, our conscience lights up, and it keeps us from living on the brink of disaster. Again, morally, physically, relationally, with our health, whatever it might be. Now, this whole idea of guardrails is nothing new. In fact, the idea of setting personal standards is nothing new. And as Sandra and I talked about this series, it dawned on us that this has really been a part of our lives since even before we met. And that in some ways, we may have never met had we not had guardrails in our lives, even in college and after that, or standards that we had set. So I thought it would be fun, especially because today is the day it is, to invite her out to talk about how this principle has interacted with our lives. So would you please welcome my wife, Sandra Stanley. Doesn't enjoy public speaking, but as you're about to discover, she does a delightful job.
Another relational guardrail that we've had in place has been our community group. We've been in community groups for 18 of our 22 years of marriage, and we wouldn't change that for anything. I don't think we will ever go without being in a community group of some sort. The relationships that you build when you're sitting in a circle and sharing life together and sharing stories and sharing prayer requests and all of those things and opening God's Word together, those relationships go very, very deep, very fast. So when you do that for a year or a year and a half with a group of people, those are just some, solid relationships. And so we see ourselves as a result of that, of having, layers and layers of accountability and friends that we can call on to help us. That's a huge guardrail, I think, in our relationship, in our marriage, and in our family with kids too.
Yep. And I've always felt like, because of the nature of what happens in a community group, because in community group, as Sandra said, you invite people in to that part of your personal walk with God, your standards and those kinds of things. So I feel like she's always had, half a dozen or more guys that she could call at any time if she felt like I was drifting off in some unhealthy habit or some bad relational direction. There's a group of people that we've been in relationship throughout these years together. And so again, it's just a guardrail. It's just a measure of safety that unfortunately I know a lot of people don't have, a lot of couples don't have, but it's one of those things you pre-decide and I make.
And for singles too.
Definitely for singles. And
really
we had groups like that before we were married, before we met.